You're too complicated for the wedding. My sister Vanessa slid the ivory invitation back across her kitchen table, the envelope already torn open, my name already crossed out. Her future mother-in-law, Patricia Thornton, sat beside her with arms folded, watching me like I carried some contagious disease. Vanessa's fiancé, Derek, stared at his coffee cup, silent as stone. The rejection was calm, surgical, and completely public. I felt my stomach drop, but I kept my face neutral. Around the table sat 3 people who had just agreed, apparently days ago, that I was too embarrassing to be seen at the most important day of my sister's life. The kitchen smelled like vanilla candles and fresh coffee, but all I could taste was the bitterness of betrayal. My hands stayed steady as I reached for the invitation, looking at my own name scratched through with blue ink. Vanessa would not meet my eyes. Patricia's mouth was pressed into a thin, satisfied line. Derek picked invisible lint off his sleeve. Nobody spoke. The silence stretched until it became its own form of cruelty. I had raised this woman. I had sacrificed years of my life to give her stability after our parents died. And now I was being uninvited from her wedding like some distant acquaintance who had overstayed their welcome. I stood slowly, chair scraping against tile. My name is Sofia Martinez. I am 34 years old, originally from San Antonio, Texas, and if this story resonates with you, please subscribe to this channel for more real-life stories about family, betrayal, and finding strength when people try to make you invisible. Later that evening, after I had driven home in shocked silence, Vanessa called to explain. Her voice was steady, practiced, like she had rehearsed this speech. She told me it was not personal. She said my divorce 3 years ago, my struggles with medical debt from caring for our dying mother, my history as a young guardian raising a teenager while barely out of my 20s myself. All of it painted the wrong picture. Patricia wanted a wedding that reflected success, stability, and social standing. My survival story, apparently, did not match that image. Vanessa kept saying it was about optics, about first impressions for Derek's family, about starting their marriage on the right foot. She swore she still loved me. She promised this was temporary, just for the wedding day itself. But I heard what she was really saying. They were not ashamed of anything I had done wrong. They were ashamed that I had struggled at all. They were ashamed that my life had been hard. That night, I could not sleep. I kept replaying Vanessa's words, looking for some crack in her reasoning, some place where I could have misunderstood. Around midnight, my phone buzzed. It was Derek. The message preview showed an apology, something about understanding my feelings. But the message never actually sent. It sat there in that gray, delivering state for several minutes before disappearing entirely. I stared at my phone, confused, then heard voices through the thin walls of my apartment. My neighbor was having a loud conversation on her balcony, and I caught fragments of it. But it was not my neighbor's voice that made me freeze. It was Derek's. He was on the phone with someone, his voice carrying through the evening air. "Mom's right," he was saying. "Family optics matter more than feelings. Sofia's history doesn't fit the narrative we are building." My chest tightened. This was not just Vanessa's decision. This was not even mostly Vanessa's decision. This was coordinated, calculated. I was not a complication they were managing. I was a sacrifice they had all agreed upon. And Derek, the man who had smiled at me at family dinners, who had thanked me for raising Vanessa so well, had been part of the plan all along. The erasure began so quietly, I almost missed it. 3 days after the kitchen table confrontation, I noticed I was no longer in the family group chat that had been buzzing with wedding details for months. At first I thought it was a technical error. Then I realized the chat was still active. I just was not in it anymore. I reached out to my cousin Beatrice, who confirmed the obvious. Vanessa had removed me. No announcement, no explanation. Just gone. A week later, I ran into Vanessa's maid of honor, Kelly, at the grocery store. She looked uncomfortable when she saw me, like she had been caught doing something wrong. When I asked about the bridesmaid dress fittings, she stammered something about schedule changes and hurried away. That evening, I checked the wedding website Vanessa had created. My name, which had been listed under family with a paragraph about how I had raised her, was gone. replaced with a generic note about being blessed with loving relatives. It was like watching myself be photoshopped out of my own family history while everyone pretended not to notice. And the cruelest part? They still expected me to help from the shadows. 2 weeks before the wedding, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. It was the photographer, a man named Tony Vasquez, confirming details about the maid of honor timeline. I froze mid-sentence as I was folding laundry. "I think you have the wrong person," I said carefully. "I'm not in the wedding party." Silence on the other end. Then, "That's strange. Vanessa, marked you as the primary point of contact for all the family photos. She sent me a whole document about your role coordinating the timeline." My hands went cold. "When did she send this?" 3 days ago. "She said you knew the family history better than anyone, that you'd organized most of the logistics, and that I should direct any questions about emotional moments or family dynamics to you specifically." I thanked him and ended the call, my mind racing. Vanessa had banned me from attending the wedding. She had erased me from the public narrative. But privately, she was still leaning on me as if nothing had changed. I pulled up my email and found dozens of messages I had ignored recently. Vendor confirmations asking about family traditions. Questions about seating arrangements for distant relatives only I would know. Requests for childhood photos that only I had organized and preserved. I spent that evening going through everything I had done for this wedding without even realizing it. For months ago, when Vanessa first got engaged, she had come to me crying, overwhelmed by the planning. I had stepped in the way I always did. I researched venues, created spreadsheets comparing catering packages, and negotiated with vendors using skills I had learned during my own wedding years ago. When the floral company almost dropped them due to a scheduling conflict, I had spent 3 hours on the phone working out a solution. When Derek's family demanded a specific traditional menu that Vanessa knew nothing about, I had researched recipes and connected her with the right caterer. I had written the family history segments for the program. I had tracked down relatives for the guest list. I had organized photo albums so the photographer would know which family members to prioritize. I had done all of this while working full-time as a medical billing specialist, the job I took after my divorce to rebuild my savings. And through it all, Vanessa had never once mentioned that I was too embarrassing to actually attend. She had been planning to use my labor while erasing my presence. The realization made me feel physically sick. I sat at my kitchen table that night, staring at my phone, debating what to do next. Part of me wanted to call Vanessa and scream at her, to demand acknowledgement for everything I had sacrificed. Part of me wanted to sabotage the wedding, to let all the carefully arranged pieces fall apart without my invisible support. But I did neither. I realized that revenge fueled by rage would only make me into the person they already believed I was. Complicated, dramatic, embarrassing. Instead, I chose something harder. I chose quiet truth. I went through my emails and texts and made a list of every vendor I had contacted, every detail I had arranged. Then I sent a single, professional email to Vanessa. "I've noticed some vendors are still reaching out to me regarding your wedding. Since I won't be attending, I wanted to make sure you have all the information you need. Attached are the files, contacts, and notes I've been maintaining. I wish you the best. No anger. No accusations. Just facts." Then I stopped. Stopped answering calls. Stopped checking the wedding chat I was no longer in. Stopped intervening. I did not sabotage anything. I simply withdrew my labor. And then I waited to see what would happen when the structure I had been holding together suddenly had no foundation. 5 days before the wedding, Patricia Thornton called me. Her voice dripped with false sweetness, the kind of tone people use when they want something but refuse to admit it. "Sofia, dear, I wanted to reach out personally. I know there's been some confusion about the wedding arrangements." I said nothing, letting her fill the silence. "I want you to know that we truly appreciate everything you've done for Vanessa. You've been such a help." Still, I waited. And I was thinking perhaps we were too hasty. "If you'd like to attend as a guest, not in the wedding party of course, but just to observe, we could arrange that. You'd sit in the back, naturally, and we'd appreciate discretion about your circumstances." My circumstances. My divorce. My financial recovery, my history of caregiving. The very things that made me human were being treated like shameful secrets. Mrs. Thornton, I said calmly, I won't be attending at all. But thank you for thinking of me. Her tone shifted immediately, the sweetness evaporating. You're refusing? I'm choosing not to participate in an event where my presence is considered embarrassing, I replied. I think that's reasonable. She sputtered something about family obligations and making sacrifices, but I had already made my decision. When she realized I was not going to bend, her voice turned cold. I hope you understand the message this sends. I do, I said. And I hope you understand the message you're sent first. 2 days before the wedding, Derek texted me. It was the first direct contact I had received from him since that unsent apology weeks ago. Hey Sophia, quick question. Do you still have those childhood photos of Vanessa? The ones from the photo albums you organized? We need them for the rehearsal dinner slideshow. I stared at the message, watching the 3 dots appear and disappear as he typed more. Also, do you have the family timeline you put together? Mom wants to mention specific dates in her speech, and we don't have the exact years. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I could have ignored him. I could have lied and said I did not have them anymore. But I did not. I delivered everything to Vanessa 3 weeks ago. I typed back. 2 full boxes of organized photos, the timeline document, and the digital files. She signed the receipt. The 3 dots appeared again, then stopped. Then started again. Finally, she says she can't find them. Can you send copies? I don't have copies. The originals are with her. This time, the response was immediate. Sophia, please. The rehearsal dinner is tomorrow night. We need those photos. I could hear the panic in his text, the confidence finally cracking. Then I suggest you look harder, I replied. They're in your home somewhere. I turned my phone off after that. I knew exactly where those boxes were. They were in Vanessa's guest room closet, exactly where I had placed them and watched her store them. She had not lost them. She had simply never looked at them, assuming I would always be available to handle things for her. The wedding morning arrived pristine and perfect, according to the photos I saw later. I was not there. I had made that decision and slept better than I had in weeks. No emergency texts could reach me because my phone was off. No last-minute crises could pull me back in because I had drawn a boundary and held it. I spent the morning at a coffee shop, reading a book I had been meaning to finish for months. The sun was warm, the coffee was good, and for the first time in years, I was not managing someone else's emergency. But while I was not there, my absence was. People noticed immediately. Relatives who had been told I was busy or unable to attend started asking questions. Where was the sister who raised Vanessa? Where was the woman who had been mentioned in every family story? The questions started small and spread quickly. I did not have to do anything. The truth simply filled the vacuum I left behind. By the time the ceremony began, at least a dozen people had asked Vanessa directly why I was not there. Each time, her answer changed slightly. Each time, the inconsistencies became more obvious. I was not there to watch her squirm. I was not there to gloat. I was simply not there. And somehow, that absence spoke louder than any confrontation could have. The photographer's crisis happened during the formal portrait session, right after the ceremony. Tony Vasquez had a shot list that he followed religiously, organized by family groupings. When he reached the maid of honor portraits, he called out confidently, "Okay, I need Sofia Martinez front and center with the bride." According to witnesses who told me later, the room froze. Vanessa's face went white. Patricia Thornton's expression turned to stone. Derek looked like he had been punched in the stomach. Kelly, the actual maid of honor, raised her hand uncertainly. "I think you mean me?" Tony checked his notes, confused. Sofia Martinez. Primary family contact. Sister who raised the bride. Maid of honor. He looked up at the wedding party, his professional confidence wavering. "She's not here?" Vanessa laughed, but it was too loud, too forced, the sound of someone trying to cover panic with humor. "There's been a mistake. Sofia couldn't make it. Kelly is my maid of honor." Tony pulled out his phone, scrolling through emails. But I have correspondence from 2 weeks ago confirming Sofia's role in coordinating family photos. She sent me the entire family tree and explained which relatives needed priority. The room was silent now. Every bridesmaid, every groomsman, every family member was watching this exchange. Patricia tried to step in, her voice sharp. That was obviously an error. Let's move forward. But Tony was not a man who let details go. He had built his business on precision, and now his carefully planned timeline was falling apart. Ma'am, this isn't just one email. I have a whole folder. Sofia provided historical context for family dynamics, explained which grandparents needed accessibility accommodations, gave me background on why certain photos mattered emotionally. She told me she'd be the one coordinating the family portrait logistics because she knew everyone's relationships and history. He turned his phone screen toward Vanessa. These emails are from your account. You specifically wrote that Sofia was the sister who raised you after your parents died. You said she was the person who understood your family best. You marked her as essential to capturing authentic emotional moments. Vanessa's carefully applied makeup could not hide how pale she had become. That was before. Plans changed. When? Tony asked, his tone genuinely confused rather than accusatory. Because the last email I have from you about Sofia's role was sent 6 days ago. You confirmed she'd be here for the family timeline portraits. Guests began whispering. This was not gossip anymore. This was documentation. This was proof of contradiction in real time. Kelly shifted uncomfortably, realizing she was standing in a role that apparently had never been fully hers. Vanessa broke. Not with dramatic tears or raised voices, but with the quiet, desperate unraveling of someone whose carefully constructed story had just developed visible cracks. It's complicated, she said, her voice tight. Sofia has been going through some things. We thought it was better if she sat this one out. But she's not sitting it out. Someone called from the assembled family. It was my cousin Beatriz, her voice clear and firm. She's not here at all. And you told us she was busy with work. Vanessa turned toward her, eyes wide. That's what I meant. She's busy, so she couldn't come. Then why did you remove her from the wedding website? Beatriz continued. Why did her whole paragraph about raising you disappear? Patricia stepped forward, her social control instincts kicking in. This is hardly the time or place for this discussion. We have a schedule to keep. But the photographer was not done. He looked at Derek now. Sir, you confirmed this morning that Sofia would be here for the groom's family photos too. You told me she was the one who helped coordinate your mother's family traditions into the ceremony. You said I should ask her about the cultural details. Derek's silence was damning. Everyone could see it now, the careful avoidance, the coordinated story, the deliberate erasure of someone who had been central to everything. Tony held up his tablet, scrolling through files with increasing concern. I have contracts here signed by Sofia. I have notes in her handwriting about family members' names and relationships. I have emails where she negotiated timeline adjustments to accommodate your grandmother's wheelchair. She did the work of a wedding coordinator. He looked at Vanessa with something close to pity. And you're telling me she just decided not to come? Patricia tried one more time to regain control. Young man, I don't know what kind of miscommunication happened, but Sofia was background help. She assisted with planning, yes, but she was never meant to be in the wedding party. She's been through a difficult divorce and some financial struggles. We thought it would be better for everyone if she maintained some distance. The words hung in the air like poison. Background help. Financial struggles. Distance. Patricia had just confirmed everything while trying to deny it. Beatrice stood up from her seat in the second row. Sofia raised Vanessa from the time she was 16 years old. Their parents died in a car accident, and Sofia was 23 and barely out of college. She gave up graduate school to take custody of a grieving teenager. She worked 2 jobs to keep them fed. She sat through every parent-teacher conference, every school play, every crisis. And you call her background help. The murmurs grew louder now, spreading through the assembled guests like ripples in water. Patricia's face flushed, but she held her ground. I meant no disrespect. I'm simply saying that Sofia's circumstances don't reflect the image we're presenting today. This is Derek and Vanessa's day, and they deserve to start their marriage surrounded by stability and success. Stability, Beatrice repeated, her voice rising. Sofia is the most stable person in this family. She's been working the same job for 3 years. She owns her car outright. She has savings. She rebuilt her life after a divorce that wasn't even her fault. Her ex-husband had an affair, and she still managed to co-parent their daughter with grace. What exactly about that is embarrassing? I learned all of this later, of course. Multiple people called me that evening to tell me what happened, their voices a mixture of outrage and vindication. But in the moment, standing in that venue with a photographer holding evidence of her lies, Vanessa had no defense. A family friend, Mrs. Cordova, stood up from the third row. She was 80 years old and commanded respect simply by existing. "I've known this family for 40 years, she said, her voice carrying despite her age. "I watched Sofia become a mother to her sister when she was barely more than a child herself. I watched her sacrifice opportunities, relationships, and her own youth to make sure Vanessa had stability. And now you're telling me she's not good enough to stand beside her at the altar?" Patricia opened her mouth to respond, but Mrs. Cordova was not finished. "Shame on all of you." The photographer, caught in the middle of a family implosion, tried to salvage his timeline. "So, should I adjust the shot list? Do we proceed without Sofia, or?" He let the question hang, genuinely unsure how to navigate the tension. Vanessa looked toward the ceremony aisle where her pristine decorations waited, toward the guests watching with increasing discomfort, toward the truth she could no longer avoid. She had spent months crafting an image of herself as someone who came from polish and privilege. But every person in this room knew the truth. She came from tragedy and survival. She came from a sister who had sacrificed everything to give her a childhood. And that sister, the one she had erased from programs and seating charts and family photos, had built the foundation that made this day possible. Derek leaned toward Vanessa, his voice low, but still audible to those nearby. "Maybe we should call her. Explain. Apologize." But Vanessa just stared at him, finally understanding what she had done. She could not call me and apologize without admitting to everyone assembled that she had deliberately excluded me. She could not maintain her image of gracious bride while confessing to calculated cruelty. She had built this perfect day on a lie, and now the foundation was crumbling in front of 200 witnesses. I did not arrive. I did not make a dramatic entrance or a vindictive scene. I stayed home, finishing my book, making lunch, existing peacefully in my absence. But that absence echoed through the venue like a siren. Every time someone asked where I was, the lie got harder to maintain. Every time Vanessa tried to move forward with a schedule, someone else would notice something I had arranged, some detail I had handled, some piece of family history only I could have known. The cake topper Vanessa had commissioned was based on a childhood story I had shared with the designer. The music selection for the father-daughter dance, played in memory of our dead father, came from a playlist I had created and sent to the DJ. The seating arrangements that kept feuding relatives separated were based on knowledge only I possessed. My fingerprints were all over this wedding, but I was not there to see it, and somehow that made the impact even stronger. People began talking openly now, comparing notes, realizing how thoroughly I had been erased despite being essential. By the time the ceremony finally began, 90 minutes behind schedule, everyone in that room understood exactly why. Not because I had caused drama, but because Vanessa had tried to build something beautiful on top of betrayal, and the truth had simply risen to the surface. The reception was worse. According to my cousin Beatrice, who called me that evening with barely contained fury, the absence became the topic no one could avoid. During dinner, relatives at different tables started sharing stories about me. Not because they were trying to punish Vanessa, but because my absence had made them remember things they had taken for granted. Mrs. Cordova told the table about the time she had visited when Vanessa was 17, struggling with college applications. She remembered finding me at the kitchen table at midnight, filling out financial aid forms with a sleeping teenager's head on my shoulder. Uncle Ramon talked about how I had worked double shifts at a medical office to pay for Vanessa's senior year expenses while recovering from my own divorce. Aunt Teresa mentioned that I had paid for Vanessa's first semester of college textbooks when financial aid did not cover everything. Story after story, spreading through the reception like wildfire. And Vanessa had to sit at the head table, smiling and nodding, pretending not to hear the growing chorus of people realizing what she had done. Derek's family was quieter, but the damage was done. Patricia's friends, the society women she had wanted to impress, were exchanging meaningful looks. This was not the stable, successful family narrative she had promised. This was dysfunction dressed in silk and flowers. Behind the scenes, away from the reception lights, Vanessa finally confronted Derek. They were in the bridal suite, surrounded by expensive flowers and elegant decorations, and everything was falling apart. "You let your mother do this," Vanessa said, her voice shaking. "You let her convince me that Sofia was an embarrassment." Derek ran his hands through his carefully styled hair. "You agreed, Vanessa. You removed her from the website. You took her out of the group chat. Don't put this all on me. Because you told me it was necessary. You said your family's reputation mattered. You said we needed to present the right image. And you went along with it because some part of you believed it too," Derek shot back. "Don't pretend you were forced into this. You made choices." The accusation hung between them, ugly and true. Vanessa had not been bullied into erasing me. She had been given permission to do what some small, insecure part of her had always wanted, to rewrite her history into something more palatable, more impressive, more clean. Their first major decision as an engaged couple had been to choose image over integrity. And now they were beginning their marriage under the weight of that choice, with 200 people who knew exactly what they had done. The resentment in that room was palpable, and it was not directed at me. It was directed at them. 3 days after the wedding, my phone rang. It was Vanessa, and she was crying. I almost did not answer, but something made me pick up. "Sofia, please. I need to talk to you." I waited, saying nothing. Everything fell apart. The wedding was a disaster. Everyone was talking about you, asking about you, judging me. The photographer wouldn't let it go. Derek's family is furious. His mother keeps saying I misrepresented our family background. Her voice was raw, desperate. "Why didn't you just come? Why didn't you step in and fix it like you always do?" The question was so absurd, so completely lacking in self-awareness, that I almost laughed. "Fix it," I repeated slowly. "Vanessa, you uninvited me from your wedding because you were embarrassed of me. You erased me from your history while using my work to build your day. And now you're angry because I did not show up to rescue you from the consequences of your own choices. But you always fix things," she said, like this explanation made sense. "You always make everything okay. That's what you do." "That's what I did," I corrected. Past tense. "So you're just going to abandon me? After everything?" The irony was stunning. After everything. As if I were the one who had betrayed our relationship. As if my absence from her wedding was the real crime, not her deliberate erasure of the person who raised her. "Vanessa, I spent years fixing things while being treated like an embarrassment," I said, my voice calm but firm. "I worked 2 jobs to give you stability. I postponed my own graduate degree. I rebuilt my life after my divorce while still making sure you had everything you needed. I organized your entire wedding while you were planning to hide me in the background like a shameful secret." She was crying harder now, but I continued. "I chose dignity over proximity. I chose self-respect over being used. I chose silence over self-betrayal. And those are not punishments, Vanessa. Those are boundaries. But you're my sister. You're supposed to forgive me." "Forgiveness is not the same as accepting mistreatment," I replied. "I can forgive you for being influenced by Derek's mother, for wanting your wedding to be perfect, for being insecure about our history. But I will not go back to being invisible while doing all the labor." "So that's it? You're just done with me?" "I'm done being treated as less than I am," I said. "If you want a relationship with me, it starts with you acknowledging what you did. Not explaining it. Not justifying it. Acknowledging it." The line was quiet for a long time. Finally, she whispered, "I don't know if I can do that. It would mean admitting I was wrong in front of everyone." "Then you have your answer," I said gently. And I hung up. In the weeks that followed, I watched from a distance as the reality settled over Vanessa like a heavy fog. The wedding photos came back, and they were beautiful but hollow. Every family portrait was missing the sister who had made the family possible. Every getting ready shot was missing the woman who had taught her how to be resilient. The photographer had done his job well, but the absence was visible in ways that had nothing to do with composition. Friends who saw the photos asked questions. Where was I? Why was Kelly, someone Vanessa had known for 3 years, standing in the maid of honor position instead of the sister who had raised her? The questions were not accusatory, just confused. And every time Vanessa had to explain, she had to choose between the truth and another lie. Derek's family was dealing with their own reckoning. Patricia had built her social standing on the appearance of class and control, and the wedding had exposed cracks in both. Her friends, the ones whose approval she valued so desperately, had witnessed the public breakdown. They had heard Beatrice's speech. They had seen Mrs. Cordova's disappointment. Patricia's carefully curated image was damaged, and she blamed Vanessa for it. The marriage that was supposed to start with perfect optics had instead begun with public dysfunction. And everyone knew why. Not because I had made a scene, but because they had tried to build something false, and truth had simply refused to be hidden. Family dynamics shifted in ways that surprised everyone. Beatrice, who had always been quiet at family gatherings, became vocally protective of me. She started hosting family dinners that she specifically invited me to, making it clear that my presence was valued. Uncle Ramon called me to apologize for not speaking up sooner, for assuming that Vanessa's wedding choices were reasonable without asking questions. Aunt Teresa sent me a long letter about how she had watched me sacrifice for years and had failed to acknowledge it properly. Even relatives I barely knew started reaching out, wanting to hear my side of the story, wanting to understand what had really happened. The family that had been willing to let me be quietly erased suddenly wanted me visible again. Not out of pity, but out of a collective realization that they had been complicit in mistreating someone who deserved better. Patricia, meanwhile, lost her quiet authority. At family gatherings she attended with Derek, people were cordial but cool. Her attempts to control narratives or redirect conversations fell flat. She had exposed herself as someone willing to erase family members for the sake of appearances, and that revelation changed how people treated her. Derek was stuck in the middle, married to Vanessa, but increasingly aware that his mother's influence had poisoned the start of his marriage. He apologized to me eventually, months later, in an awkward phone call where he admitted he should have stood up for me from the beginning. I moved forward with my life in ways I had not been able to when I was constantly managing Vanessa's needs. I applied for a promotion at work and got it, moving into a management position that came with better pay and more stability. I started dating again, meeting someone who valued my strength rather than being intimidated by my history. I reconnected with old friends I had drifted away from during the years of intense caregiving. I took a weekend trip to the coast with Beatrice, the first vacation I had taken in 5 years. For the first time since our parents died, I was building a life that belonged to me. Not because I was running from family, but because I had finally stopped sacrificing myself to maintain relationships with people who did not value what I offered. I was no longer the background helper, the invisible support system, the woman who fixed everything while receiving no recognition. I was Sofia Martinez, a woman who had survived tragedy, rebuilt from divorce, raised a sister alone, and walked away from mistreatment with her integrity intact. And that identity, that solid sense of self-worth, was worth more than any wedding invitation could ever be. My absence from Vanessa's wedding was not revenge. It was self-preservation. And in choosing myself, I had found something I had lost years ago: peace. 6 months after the wedding, I attended a small family gathering at Aunt Teresa's house. It was nothing formal, just a Sunday dinner for relatives who happened to be available. Vanessa was there. We saw each other across the living room, and for a moment, neither of us moved. Then she walked over, her steps slow and uncertain. "Can we talk?" she asked quietly. We stepped onto the back porch, away from the noise of family conversation. The evening air was cool, comfortable. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Then Vanessa said, "I've been in therapy, trying to understand why I did what I did." I nodded, waiting. "My therapist helped me see that I was ashamed of our history. Not because of anything you did wrong, but because I wanted to pretend I came from something different. Something easier. Something that would not require explanation." She looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time in months. "You deserved better than that. You deserved to be honored, not hidden. And I'm sorry." It was not a perfect apology. It did not undo the pain. But it was honest, and that mattered. "Thank you," I said simply. We did not hug. We did not cry. We just stood there, two sisters who had survived more than most people could imagine, trying to figure out if there was a path forward. Inside, through the window, I could see my family laughing, eating, living. Patricia was not there. Derek sat quietly in the corner. But I was there, visible and valued, no longer background help but recognized for exactly who I was. I had not won by destroying anyone. I had won by refusing to disappear. And that, I realized, was the only victory that ever really mattered.